November 21st, 1933, Chicago, Illinois. A respected physician, feminist, and civic leader stood over the body of her 22-year-old daughter-in-law on an examination table in her basement surgery. Dr. Alice Wynekoop would claim an accident. Investigators would call it murder. How does a woman dedicated to saving lives become a killer? Welcome to Shattered Crime, where we uncover the darkest truths hidden behind ordinary faces. Today, we explore Chicago's most notorious female criminals, from poisoners who murdered husbands for insurance money to teenage sisters who killed for cash, from respected doctors to international con artists. These are the true stories of women who crossed the ultimate line in the Windy City. First case, Ottilie Tillie Klimek, 45 years old. Chicago, Cook County, Illinois. Chicago's Little Poland neighborhood in the early 1920s. A tight-knit community of Polish immigrants where neighbors knew each other's business and trusted each other with their lives. Tillie Klimek was known as a warm, congenial woman, an excellent cook and housekeeper. But beneath the smiles and home-cooked meals lay something darker. Tillie had a disturbing habit. She could predict exactly when people around her would die. S as an infant. She married 5 times. In 1914, her first husband, Józef Mitkiewicz, died of what was listed as heart trouble. Later that year, her second husband, Joseph Ruskowski, also died. A boyfriend died shortly after. Then in 1921, her third husband, Frank Kupczyk, fell ill. Tillie's weapon was arsenic, disguised in food. She poisoned at least 13 people successfully and attempted to poison 7 others. Her victims included husbands, boyfriends, nieces, nephews, sisters-in-law, children, and grandchildren. She took out life insurance policies on her husbands before their deaths. She worked with her cousin, Nellie Kulik, who provided the arsenic. When Frank Kupczyk became ill in 1921, doctors finally tested for poison. Arsenic was confirmed. Authorities exhumed Tillie's previous husbands. All showed arsenic poisoning. The investigation revealed a pattern stretching back to 1914. Tillie's trial in March 1923 captivated Chicago. She pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Exhumed bodies, insurance policies, and witness testimony about her chilling predictions. The jury convicted her. Tillie Klimek died in 1936 at the Joliet Correctional Center. She was 60 years old. She never admitted guilt. Her cousin, Nellie Kulik, was tried but acquitted. Up to 20 people may have been poisoned by Tillie, a serial poisoner who killed for decades. Second case, Regina and Margaret DeFrancisco, teenagers. Chicago, Cook County, Illinois. June 6, 2000. Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood. Regina DeFrancisco called her boyfriend, 22-year-old Oscar Velasquez, to her home. He thought it was a normal visit, but Regina and her sister Margaret had other plans. They wanted money. The DeFrancisco sisters were teenagers living together in Chicago. They were part of a peer group that included Veronica Garcia, who would later become a key witness. The sisters had access to firearms and were involved in petty criminal activity. On June 6th, they decided to rob Oscar Velasquez. When Velasquez arrived at the sisters' home, Margaret shot him once in the back of the head. He died instantly. The sisters then robbed him of $600. They transported his body in his Camaro Z28 to a vacant lot and set it on fire using nail polish remover. They attempted to sell the Camaro, but failed. Other tenants and neighbors noticed Velázquez's disappearance. Witnesses came forward. Jessica Benitez, Luciana Matias, and Maria Constantino provided testimony. Veronica Garcia, the woman who provided the gun, accepted a plea deal and testified against the sisters. The DeFrancisco sisters fled. Margaret was captured on March 24, 2002, in Rockford, Illinois, after a tip from America's Most Wanted. Regina was captured on October 18, 2002, in Dallas, Texas, after a traffic stop and high-speed chase. Regina's trial ended in July 2004 with a conviction for murder during armed robbery. Margaret's first trial ended in a mistrial due to an 11-1 deadlock. Her retrial in November 2004 resulted in conviction. Regina was sentenced to 35 years. Margaret received 46 years. Two teenage sisters who killed a boyfriend for $600. Sibling killers. Third case, Dr. Alice Lois Lindsay Wynekoop, 62 years old. Chicago, Cook County, Illinois. 1933. Alice Wynekoop was a woman of extraordinary accomplishment. Born February 1, 1871, she graduated from Northwestern University Women's Medical School in 1895. She taught biology and medicine at the University of Illinois. She was a progressive Republican, a feminist, and a lecturer on child hygiene, adoption, sexuality, and women's rights. She advocated for children's welfare and was nationally recognized for her work. She was brilliant, cultured, and deeply religious. Rita Gretchen Gardner. Wynekoop, 22, was married to Alice's son, Earl. The marriage was unhappy. Earl was reportedly dissatisfied, and Alice felt protective of him. Financial pressures weighed on the family. On that November day, Rita's body was discovered on an examination table in Alice's basement surgery. The crime occurred in Alice's home. Rita was found dead on the examination table. The method of death suggested deliberate action, not an accident. Investigators believed Alice killed Rita to free her son from an unhappy marriage and to alleviate financial burdens. Alice's first trial was declared a mistrial due to her fragile health. Her second trial led to conviction for murder. The case was sensational. A respected physician and civic leader accused of murdering her own daughter-in-law. Alice Wynekoop was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment at Oakdale Reformatory for Women in Dwight, Illinois. She served approximately 14 years and was released for good behavior on December 29, 1947. A woman who dedicated her life to medicine and children's welfare ended it as a convicted murderer. A doctor who killed. Fourth case, Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, and international. Born December 26, 1871, in rural Ireland, Mary Ann Duignon stole her parents' savings at age 19 and fled to Britain, then New York. She arrived in Chicago during the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition and quickly entered the world of prostitution and robbery. She adopted the name Chicago May. Chicago May was beautiful, cunning, and ruthless. She worked as a prostitute and robbed clients. She moved to New York, danced, and engaged in petty crime. She married briefly to Jim Sharp and had relationships with several criminal lovers, including Eddie Guerin and Charlie Smith. Chicago May participated in major crimes, including the American Express robbery in Paris with Eddie Guerin. Her notoriety peaked in London, where she mingled with aristocrats and criminal figures. But in 1907, an altercation with Eddie Guerin led to attempted murder. She served time, but was repeatedly arrested for prostitution and petty theft after release. By the 1920s, she was living destitute in Detroit. She attempted to profit from her notoriety by publishing an autobiography, Chicago May, Her Story, by the Queen of Crooks in 1928. Chicago May's criminal career was opportunistic and adaptable. She moved from petty theft to high-profile international crimes. She was audacious, mobile, and blended criminality with public notoriety. Chicago. May died on May 30th, 1929, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at age 57. She died penniless and largely forgotten. An international criminal. Fifth case. Louesa Woolf, later Louise Vermiglia, Chicago, Cook County, Illinois. Louise Vermiglia was born in July 1868 to Prussian immigrants in Cook County. She was the oldest daughter in a large family. She married 3 times. Her first husband, Fred Brinkamp, died in 1893. Her second husband, Charles Vermiglia, died around 1909. Her third husband, Richard Smith, a boarder, married her in 1910 and died the same year. A pattern was emerging. She poisoned at least 9 people, including family members and boarders. Her victims included her first husband, Fred Brinkamp, her children Cora and Florence Brinkamp, her step-family Lillian Brinkamp, Charles Vermiglia and Harry Vermiglia, her son Frank Brinkamp, and boarders Jason Rupert and Richard Smith. The case broke open in 1911 after the death of Arthur Bissonnette revealed arsenic poisoning. Louise was arraigned in November 1911 for Bissonnette's death. She was later charged with Richard Smith's murder in 1912, but the evidence was largely circumstantial. Louise attended court in a wheelchair, suffering from paralysis and other health issues. She had attempted suicide before trial. The prosecution struggled to prove intent beyond reasonable doubt. Louise Vermiglia lived quietly after the dismissal. On December 31, 1913, she committed suicide by ingesting poison, the same method she allegedly used to kill at least 9 people. She was 45 years old, a suspected serial poisoner who was never convicted. Justice eluded the families of her victims. A poisoner who escaped justice. Sixth case. Sandra Kolalou, also known as Sandra White. Chicago, Cook County, Illinois. Sandra Kolalou was a tenant at a North Side Chicago boarding house. In 2018, she had successfully sued the CTA for $3 million after suffering injuries from a bus accident. But by October 2022, she was facing eviction. Her landlord, 69-year-old Francis Walker, had issued an eviction notice. On October 2022, Sandra murdered Francis Walker. She then dismembered Walker's body. She stored the body parts in a kitchen freezer and disposed of them in a garbage bin at a North Side beach. Tenants traced Sandra disposing of a body bag. They alerted police. Sandra was arrested shortly after an incident where she allegedly threatened a tow truck driver with a knife. Sandra's trial began in April 2024. She claimed innocence and alleged she was being framed. She was charged with first-degree murder, dismembering a human body, and aggravated identity theft. On July 10, 2024, Sandra Kolalou was sentenced to 58 years in Cook County Prison. While in jail, she had successfully pursued civil litigation using her maiden name. A woman who killed and dismembered her landlord over an eviction notice. A landlord murdered and dismembered. Seventh case. Desiree and Clarissa Figueroa, mother and daughter. Chicago, Cook County, Illinois. April 2019. Marlen Ochoa-Lopez, 19 years old and 9 months pregnant, was lured to a home on Chicago's South Side with the promise of free baby clothes. She thought she was meeting a helpful woman from a Facebook group. Clarissa Figueroa, the mother, and her daughter Desiree had planned the crime carefully. When Marlen arrived, Clarissa strangled her with a cable while Desiree assisted. Then Clarissa cut the baby from Marlen's womb. Marlen's body was wrapped in a blanket and placed in a garbage can outside the home. Her family reported her missing. Weeks passed. DNA testing revealed that the baby was not Clarissa's child. Police traced the connection to Marlen. The baby, having suffered severe trauma during the forced delivery, died approximately 2 months later. 3 lives destroyed by greed and delusion. Clarissa Figueroa pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in April 2024 and was sentenced to 50 years. Desiree Figueroa pleaded guilty in January 2024 as part of a plea deal to testify against her mother. A mother and daughter who lured a pregnant woman to her death and cut her baby from her womb. Marlen Ochoa-Lopez was 19 years old. She was excited about becoming a mother. She never got to hold her baby. The most horrifying crime on this list. 8th case. In April 2019, Chicago became the chilling backdrop for a crime so horrifying it shocked an entire city. 19-year-old Marlen Ochoa-Lopez, 9 months pregnant and full of dreams for her unborn child, went missing. What started as a simple act of trust would soon unfold into one of the most disturbing cases in recent American criminal history. Marlen had been lured under the pretense of receiving baby clothes. She didn't know that the people she was meeting were a mother-daughter duo, Clarissa and Desiree Figueroa, whose lives had twisted into a dangerous, violent path. Once inside their home, the nightmare began. Clarissa Figueroa, the mother, strangled Marlen with a cable, a brutal act executed coldly, while her daughter Desiree assisted. The violence didn't end there. In an unfathomable act, Clarissa cut the baby from Marlen's womb. The newborn's life was immediately put in jeopardy, a life born into tragedy before it had even begun. In the desperate aftermath, Clarissa attempted to disguise her crime, wrapping Marlen's body in a blanket and placing it in a garbage can outside their home. She even tried to pass the baby off as her own, a grotesque attempt to create a normal life out of unimaginable horror. But the truth, as it often does, could not be hidden forever. Investigators quickly began to piece together the grim puzzle. DNA testing revealed what authorities feared. The baby was not Clarissa's child. And the body of Marlen Ochoa-Lopez was recovered, confirming the worst. The community, already grieving for a missing young woman, now faced the shocking truth. A life had been violently taken, and a newborn had been subjected to a harrowing beginning. The legal system moved forward. Desiree Figueroa, the daughter, chose to cooperate with authorities, pleading guilty in January 2024 to first-degree murder as part of a deal to testify against her mother. In May 2024, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Clarissa Figueroa faced her fate in April 2024, pleading guilty to first-degree murder and receiving a 50-year sentence. But the case didn't end with the mother and daughter alone. Clarissa's boyfriend, Piotr Bobak, who had assisted in covering up the crime, was also brought to justice. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The story of Marlen Ochoa-Lopez, Clarissa, and Desiree Figueroa is a haunting reminder of how trust can be manipulated and how lives can be destroyed in a single, tragic act. For Marlen, the young mother with a future ahead, her life was stolen, and her child never had the chance to grow up. For the Figueroas, justice would come, but it could never undo the harm they inflicted. In the end, Chicago would remember Marlen Ochoa-Lopez not just for the tragedy that ended her life, but for the innocence and dreams that were cruelly taken. And in the halls of justice, sentences were delivered, a stark acknowledgement of the crime's gravity, yet a somber reminder of what can never be returned: lost lives and stolen futures. In Chicago, a mother and daughter lured a pregnant teenager, murdered her, and stole her unborn child, leaving a community reeling and a newborn lost before it could live.